The most destructive conversation you'll ever have is the one you're avoiding. You think the silence is keeping the peace. It's actually the sound of the relationship eroding. This framework will give you a way to navigate these essential conflicts, turning them from relationship enders into moments of actual connection. And the truth is, the argument you're avoiding is already happening around the clock inside your own head. That's the real enemy. The first opponent you have to face in any difficult conversation is yourself. It's the silent argument you have in the shower, on your drive to work, while trying to fall asleep. In this conversation, you are a brilliant lawyer. You have exhibits, precedents, and a closing argument that would bring a jury to tears. The other person, in your mind, is a caricature, a villain. They are selfish, lazy, or inconsiderate. You've already tried, convicted, and sentenced them in the courtroom of your mind before you've even said a word. So when you finally do speak, you aren't starting a conversation, you are executing a sentence. Your tone, your body language, your choice of words are all contaminated by a verdict you reached days ago. The conversation is over before it begins. But there's a way to stop this internal prosecution dead in its tracks. It all starts by asking yourself one deeply uncomfortable question. That question is, what is my contribution to this problem? This single question shifts the entire universe. It moves you from a mindset of blame to a mindset of contribution. The goal of blame is to find a villain. The goal of contribution is to find understanding. They are fundamentally different games. Looking for your contribution, even if it's just 1%, is about finding your leverage. It's the only part of the dynamic you have any control over. Think about getting into a fender bender. You can spend all your energy blaming the other driver for pulling out unexpectedly. It feels righteous. It feels correct. It also leaves you powerless. Or you can ask about your contribution. Was I driving a little too fast? Was I distracted by the radio? Could I have left more space? This gives you something to change. It gives you agency. Some part of you will scream that this is unfair. Why should you look for your 1% when they are so clearly 99% at fault? You do it because your goal is to have a better outcome, a safer journey. You do it because winning the argument and losing the relationship is the most expensive victory you can imagine. Once you've located your piece of the puzzle, you're ready to talk. But how you begin that conversation determines whether it's a bridge or a battlefield. The first 30 seconds are everything. You start by building a bridge. This is done with something called the third story. Every conflict has 3 stories. There's your story, there's their story. And then there's the third story. The third story is the one a neutral observer would tell. It's a description of the gap between your 2 experiences, stated without judgment. It sounds like this. I've been thinking about the project deadline. It seems we have different ideas about what's achievable by Friday. Or to a partner, I've noticed we seem to be on different pages about our weekend plans. I'd like to understand what you have in mind. The third story frames the issue as a problem to be solved together, instead of a fight to be won. It's an invitation to a shared space. It says, we are 2 reasonable people with different information or different values. Let's figure it out. This de-escalates the situation from the very first sentence. Of course, even with a perfect opening, the other person might respond with their own story, full of emotion and accusation. They might throw the grenade you were expecting. This is the critical moment. Your instinct will be to defend, to interrupt, to correct their facts. You must resist that urge with everything you have. What you do next feels like conversational aikido. You absorb their force. You do this with radical acknowledgement. You must demonstrate that you have heard and understood their perspective and their feelings, especially the feelings. This is a crucial distinction. Acknowledging their feelings is different from agreeing with their facts. You can hold up a mirror to their emotional reality without accepting it as the objective truth. It sounds like, wow. It sounds like when I said that, you felt completely dismissed and disrespected. Or, I can hear how frustrating it was for you when you came home and the kitchen was still a mess. It sounds like it felt like, I don't care about the promises I make. You are simply describing the world from their point of view, as they've just explained it. You're validating their right to feel the way they do. Feelings are the live wire in any conflict. You can't argue someone out of how they feel. Arguing with a feeling is like arguing with the weather. It's just there. When someone feels truly heard, a profound biological shift occurs. Their threat response begins to power down. Their heart rate slows, the adrenaline recedes. They move from a defensive crouch to a more open posture. Only then, once they feel seen, can they begin to hear you. But how do you make that pivot from their story to yours without triggering their defenses all over again? You change one word, you replace the word but with the word and. The word but is a verbal eraser. It invalidates everything that came before it. I understand you felt disrespected, but that wasn't my intention. The but just told them that their feelings are irrelevant in the face of your intentions. You've just put their defenses right back up. Try it with and. I can absolutely see why you felt so disrespected when I interrupted you. And I want to explain what was going on in my head at that moment. The word and is an expander. It creates a world where two realities can exist at once. Your experience and my experience are both true. My feelings are true, and your feelings are true. I can feel disrespected by what you did, and you can have had a perfectly valid reason for doing it. And creates a more complex, more accurate, and more generous reality. It allows you to add your perspective to the conversation without subtracting theirs. This entire process sounds so calm and methodical. The problem is, you are human. What happens when your own physiology betrays you? When your face gets hot, your hands shake, and your carefully planned techniques evaporate in a cloud of pure anger. You have to name what's happening inside your own body. The flood of emotion you feel is a physiological event. Your system is pumping with adrenaline and cortisol. Your amygdala, the brain's smoke detector, is screaming that you are under attack. Trying to ignore this is like trying to ignore a fire alarm blaring in your ear. The way to regain control is to acknowledge the signal. You can even say it out loud. I'm noticing I'm getting really angry right now. Or, I have to be honest, my heart is pounding and I'm a little scared to continue this conversation. This act of naming your own emotion does two things. First, it creates a small space between you and the feeling. You are the person observing the anger. You are more than just the anger itself. This gives you a sliver of control. Second, it's an act of profound vulnerability that can completely disarm the other person. The dynamic shifts from two adversaries in a fight to two human beings struggling with a difficult moment. Some people worry this is a sign of weakness, that it gives the other person ammunition. The opposite is true. Unspoken emotions leak out anyway. They manifest as a sarcastic tone, a tightened jaw, or passive aggression. Voicing your feelings cleanly is an act of supreme self-control. It prevents that emotion from poisoning the well. So now you've both shared your stories, you've acknowledged the feelings in the room, you're starting to understand each other. But you still have a problem to solve. You solve it by moving from what you want to why you want it. This is the shift from positions to interests. A position is a demand. I refuse to work this weekend. An interest is the underlying need or value that drives that position. I'm feeling completely burned out, and I desperately need time to recharge and connect with my family. You can't compromise on positions without one person feeling like they lost. But you can find countless creative ways to satisfy both sets of interests. Once you've both shared your underlying interests, you begin to invent options. The one rule during this phase is to separate inventing from deciding. You brainstorm every possible solution, no matter how wild, without judging any of them. For the work weekend example, the interests are the company's need to hit a deadline and the employee's need for rest. The options could be pushing the deadline, bringing in temporary help, paying a massive overtime bonus, giving the employee all of next week off, reassigning part of the project. The list goes on. You create a menu of possibilities. Only after the menu is full do you go back and start evaluating which option best meets everyone's core interests. This transforms the conversation from a tug of war into a creative collaboration. You're no longer adversaries, you're partners attacking a common problem. Ultimately, the purpose of a difficult conversation is to be understood. Agreement is a bonus, but understanding is the foundation. Every relationship of any depth will have conflict. It's a sign that something important is at stake. Avoiding these conversations doesn't preserve the relationship. It starves it of the oxygen it needs to grow. It sentences it to a slow death of assumptions and unspoken resentments. True connection isn't a magical state of permanent harmony. It's the messy, courageous, and ongoing process of navigating your differences. It's the strength you build by talking through the things that are hard. Each of these conversations is a choice. You can choose the path of silence, which feels safe but leads to decay. Or you can choose the path of engagement, which is difficult and frightening, but is the only way to build something that lasts. You don't create a strong relationship by avoiding the weight. You create it by finding a way to lift it.